That was Brandon Duff with Easy Love, and welcome back. It is the Country Viewpoint here on Flow FM. Well, it's time to turn our attention to an issue that we often speak about on this program, and that is the lack of access that regional Australians have to childcare. And I got the CEO of the Regional Australia Institute peak body, Liz Ritchie, on the program to discuss some of the issues behind childcare accessibility when it comes to regional Australia. And here's what she had to tell me.
The latest study that the Institute's undertaken is in the Marinara and Western Downs region specifically. And this work was actually commissioned by Origin Energy because they themselves, as an incredibly large employer in the region, felt that it was one of the key barriers to actually attracting and retaining workforce. And as they're thinking about the sort of future workforce needs, childcare was coming up again and again. But outside of their own needs, they're also very interested in the wider community and ensuring that we had a better understanding of what were those challenges that were being faced. So that was really the kind of background of how we came to be doing that piece of work. And I guess essentially when you look at what the reports found, it's that there really is a shortfall when it comes to not only accessing childcare, but the availability of childcare and indeed the workforce that's required to meet that growing demand. And so, I guess essentially the issues and problems that have been identified are not new. If you've been following this space and you're interested in childcare, rural and regional Australia is suffering at the hands of what's been called a childcare desert, and that came off the back of another report that was released probably 12 months ago through the Mitchell Institute. So for us, it was pleasing to take a deep dive in one area and know that what we found is consistent with what we're hearing, but equally that it has, through the recommendations, and we can step through those in a moment, that they have national applicability. So the findings should be useful in a broader scale.
Yeah, as you say there, that was very much the segue that I was looking for, just regarding, the focus area of the study being on these particular regions. But, this is a widespread issue. And here at Flow FM, we like to really hone in on the fact that, we sort of separate quasi-regions from really rural parts of the country. And when you look at, the issue of childcare, we're talking about some towns out there, Liz, where, things are pretty dire. I mean, just in South Australia alone, we've had some positive developments actually in the last couple of months with regards to some childcare centres getting the approval for building in places like the York Peninsula and Kingston Southeast. But in other parts of the state and country, we're seeing these rural towns that just have absolutely no hope when it comes to being able to have a convenient sort of arrangement with childcare needs. This issue just goes on and on, really, Liz. I mean, is there sort of some sort of, mark in the sand that we can identify going into the future as to when things might start to improve, not just for the larger regional centres across the country, but for those rural towns too?
Yeah, and I appreciate the differential between, the more rural small centres versus the larger centres. They do have a unique set of challenges in that, all of the issues around childcare and indeed other services are often exacerbated. And I guess, if you come to some of the potential recommendations, what we know is already happening in some parts and perhaps could start to happen in others is that, where you're in a smaller regional centre, it's about how do you actually start to think about all of the services through a new light and understanding that, if we've got a gap in childcare, what are the opportunities to perhaps support and fit out other community-owned premises to extend and create broader family daycare facilities.
That's the CEO of the Regional Australia Institute, Liz Ritchie, and there's plenty more to discuss with her right after this short break. Stay tuned. Sam Fisher and Amy Shark with High on You, and welcome back. It is the Country Viewpoint Tuesday edition, and we're talking about the issues behind regional Australia when it comes to childcare accessibility with the CEO of the Regional Australia Institute peak body, Liz Ritchie. We're talking about the childcare desert destinations. Here's Liz Ritchie explaining more about this topic.
As I said at the outset, that childcare desert report was actually the Mitchell Institute's body of work that was released almost 12 months ago. I guess what we've sought to do is to recognise some of the work that's already been undertaken and to build upon that work. So, if we look at the region that we've taken a deep dive in, one of the most concerning factors for me was, I think, it's like the deficit lens, as I would describe it, on the childcare sector. So in the study, we actually found that people who were working in childcare, they were feeling undervalued. And certainly if you look at the financial return, you could draw that linkage because, we know quite frankly that childcare workers are not paid adequately for what is a very important and fundamental role in our society. And so addressing that first and foremost, I think is really important. Because of that deficit lens, and this really starts to speak to some of the recommendations, we found that in that region itself, those two regions, for every childcare worker, there was an additional 1.8 people with relevant childcare qualifications. So they have the qualifications, but they're choosing not to work in the sector for the reasons that I just discussed. So we really have to understand, how can you re-engage and bolster the childcare qualified sectors of the employment market, and more broadly attract future childcare workers. So what do we need to be doing as leaders in the community to recognise, both through a higher return on salary perhaps, but also more broadly just the status and significance of childcare workers? I mean, we can't do what we do without them.
No, very much true. Let's just take a look at these recommendations, Liz. The floor's yours.
Sure. So, look, first and foremost, it is really important that in your particular region, rural, remote, even in larger centres, the childcare issues are everybody's issues. So you really need to create a regional rural workforce plan and strategy for the childcare sector. So that means getting all the big industry players and employers around the table, the current childcare facilities and operators that you have, governments, local governments, all of the key players and champions around the table to really understand, well, what is current state of play, what are the gaps, and what are our future work needs in this region. So you're thinking in a really holistic way about how you actually start to plug that gap, and what are the innovative solutions that I talked about earlier that you could start to adopt to actually fill the gap. Secondly is, unlike health and, again, education, they have very strong relief pool of workers. So, locum teachers, etc., casual nurses, there's a really strong pool of staff. Well, it used to be stronger, and our current workforce shortage is probably not as strong as it once was, but they're certainly stronger than they are in the childcare sector. So that was identified as another area that needed some attention, so that where current employees are having sick days or annual leave, that they can actually go and enjoy their annual leave knowing that the centre won't have to close. So we need that really strong, relief pool and backup so that those workers can come through. And I think, some of the other recommendations really speak to, like I said earlier, it's that extension of what services exist. So noting that where there are kindergartens in small rural towns, how can you actually transition to provide longer daycare options that maybe are alongside those organisations?
Regional Australia Institute CEO Liz Ritchie speaking to us on the Country Viewpoint today. Third hour on the way shortly. Stay tuned.